So welcome everyone. For this lecture today, I'm just going to go over your part 2 of your project 2. I can go over that as well, but what I wanted to do here is just give you a quick example of what might be required of you to help complete this project. I think my voice is still working. All right, sorry about that. So after if you take a look at your part 2 of your project 1, you'll see that you're creating this type of logo based off of the path that you created. And I can go through that a bit more in depth as well. But there's one portion of your part 2, and again, if you didn't get to this, that's fine. Essentially, what I wanted to try and show off is that we can use some of the options here, like Unite, Subtract, to manipulate your selection. Now, this sounds a bit more complicated than it is. Essentially, all we're doing here is, if you remember from our previous lecture, we made the trash can fully black and white, and we made the roof of that train station fully red, and we were able to make it off of a huge selection of those two things. What we can do once we create a path is change our path to a subtraction mode, and once you do that, you're able to cut away from the path and make it a bit more unique and different looking. And we could do a quick example of that. So for your participation today as well, all I'm looking for, because we're not doing too much today in session 2, it's more so just trying to make sure you guys get to part 2 of your project 1. Why don't we open up our item here, and inside of my folder for new files, we have our participation assessments again. And you'll see down here that what I want you guys to do today excuse me, is make a type of path that is around an apple. And it doesn't need to be this apple or anything. It could be any image you pick as well. But what I want you to do is follow along with what I do and cut around your path so that you're minimizing how much surface area it is. So what I mean by that is, in my example here, this entire apple was white, but I used the subtraction tool to cut away the inside, and this was left with this type of circle. It looks kind of bad, so I'll try to do it better this time. But you'll notice here as well, in the top right corner, I'm actually able to add that circle to be a saved custom shape. And logos and shapes and vector images, if you remember from DM140, are useful for us because we can use them to create some cool concepts. That's more later on down the line. What I really want to show you guys today is how to use the pen tool and the subtraction item in that pen tool. So why don't we get started? So let's go into our DM140 here. I actually really quickly forgot to make this folder. I apologize, everyone. Let me make this super quick for everyone. Sorry. I don't think I saved it when I made it last time. Then let's just go to our desktop, and there's my apples. Awesome. So inside of your session 2, in your folder for new files, there should be an apples JPEG file. So you can go ahead and open that up at your own convenience. And then once you open it up, you'll notice that we just get a nice little image here to work with. It's a bit low quality when we zoom in, but once we have it zoomed out, it's pretty good to go. So if we were going to do what we did in our last lecture, what we did was we selected the pen or the free pen tool, whichever one you preferred. And then we went ahead and we traced around some objects inside of our image here. So if you see here, I'm going to try to do it on this apple here. And you can remember, if you click with the pen and you drag it, you're able to get that curve that Project 1's asking about. I kind of suck at doing that, so I'm just going to make it a bit smaller than usual. But either way that you do it is fine. If you do the curve option, it does look a bit smoother. So we could try to do some curves. But if you find that the curve is a bit difficult for you to figure out, you can just go ahead and select it multiple times with your dots, like I showed you in the last lecture. All right, my curves are a little off. That's okay. I don't want to be spending all the time on it, because for this one, it's just a little rough practice to help you guys for your main project. And again, it does need to be practice perfect, as long as you're able to pretty much understand what we're doing. That'll be good enough for me. All right, so this is what we did last time. We created our path, and once I finish my path, if I click here, I have the, there we go. And it's a bit out the edge there, so I'm going to click here and try to drag a bit up. All right. So it says close path in my history panel, which tells me that I have finished creating my path. Sorry, my webcam's a little weird. And after I created my path, I can go to my paths channel. And I have this nice work path here. Let's see here. Did I mess up something? I think I did. Sorry, everyone. I actually messed up the lecture here because I was on the wrong mode. Let me very quickly just freehand this super quickly. So that's what you would do, but if you notice, I didn't have my path created fully, and that's because my mode was on subtract instead of unite. I'm going to say I did it on purpose, apologies. So let me just really quickly retrace my path, and you'll notice while I'm creating my work path, you'll see on my paths panel that I have this type of white circle being created, and that's telling us where our inside of our path will be. I'm going to go down here. Let's see here. Maybe I could do it this way. Drag it out a little. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's okay. And I can spend less time on it. Now, if you notice here, I look at my work path, I have this type of white image inside the center. And if you recall from what we did last time, once we have our path created, we could go down to the new adjustment layer, and then we can add it in. So maybe I'll add in a color balance. And I'm going to make it really red. And you'll notice everything in my screen is now getting very red because the color balance is applied to the entire image. So how do I go ahead and just make my little selection here, my path red? Well, after I create my color balance, I can go to layer, vector mask, and then current path. And it will cut away all the path until I get to the red there. Now my path is a bit over the apple here, so it's going to be red a bit too. As if you go over a little bit, it's fine. It's no big deal as long as you're kind of on the mark. Just make sure you don't like go too crazy with it there. Now this is interesting, but it's not useful for us just yet because in your project part 2, you're not doing what you did in part 1 with adding in a color saturation to your image. You're cutting apart a wine glass and then adding it into a type of logo. So why don't we go ahead, and if you take a look at page 18 in your project 1, you'll see that in this section here, we have our white work path that we have, and then he's able to cut it away there where there's nothing inside. So why don't we try to mimic that as well? I have my work path here, and I have the white image inside of there. And I'm actually going to go ahead and delete my secondary path. So how do I go about creating this so that the white in the inside is gone? So that I can only get the edge of my image instead of, if I create a new fill layer and make it a color fill, you'll see that I have a fully white image here. How do I go about making it so that it's only the edges there? I can go ahead and select my pen tool again. And while my work path is selected in my paths pane, and my pen tool is selected, I can go up here to the top and select the unite option and change it to subtract. So at the start of my lecture, I actually had it on subtract by accident, but I'll show you what happens if I use subtract instead of unite. So with my pen tool selected and subtract and work path selected, I can go ahead and click somewhere inside of my apple. I want to stay along the edges and not go too far out. So I'm just going to click somewhere inside a little bit. I'm going to click here. And you'll notice that my path is still set on the outside. And if I go ahead and click down here and keep trying to go around, you might notice something in the paths panel and that the white is actually disappearing on me here. So now I subtracted all of the white away from my image, and if I go ahead and close my path, see here, you'll notice it's a bit hard to see, but my path kind of has it so that it's cut out in the center and I have the edges left. Now this is going to look a little rough, but that's fine because this is just for our example here. Now what happens with this new path, if I go, after selecting it, go to layer, new fill layer, and color fill? Well, you'll notice that this time it doesn't put the white in the center because I subtracted that white using my pen tool away from it. So inside of your project 2, if you take a look at the wine glass that you're creating, you'll see that he also subtracts from the center there. Now again, mine looks a little rough, so Why don't I try remaking it very quick, just so that it looks a bit better. Let's see here. Maybe I can make it a bit more circular. And again, the only way that I'm doing this is that I have my work path selected to subtract. But because this is just practice for your participation, this doesn't need to be like a perfect circle. And you also don't need to use it on this apple. You can do any apple you want, or you can use a different image even. I'm fine with whatever. But this does look a little odd, but it's fine for now. Let's push this to be there. Awesome. So again, I subtracted everything. I could go to my layer, new fill layer, and then color fill. And now I have this cool little color fill layer that I can then trace around from my apple. Now, what's the point of doing all this if I wanted to create a logo? Well, you're going to have to use that subtract tool in project tool 2. But another thing you can do is, let's just say that this is my logo. I'm going to rename my layer to logo. After I have this layer created, I can go to edit up here, go all the ways down to the bottom of edit. And if you did the extra credit from DM140, this might look a bit familiar from you because you used the brush in that extra credit. But you'll see that underneath define new, we have pattern, brush, and custom shape. And again, the custom shapes were those CSH files that we talked about that I loaded in as well. So under that, why don't we just hit custom shape? It adds in a shape for us, and my shape is called logo. So why don't I go grab up where I can get my shapes? Again, if you go to the bottom of your rectangle tool down here, and you right click on it, and you go to custom shape, you can then go ahead and open up your drop down menu right here. And then I called my shape logo, so I'm going to type in logo. And this looks a little weird just because I did it kind of quickly, but I can then click on the logo shape I added. And then I can actually go ahead and drag around the shape I created. So you might be getting some ideas for a custom logo for your capstone or anything like that as well, if you wanted to try it out. We aren't talking about the capstone until week 2, but this is an interesting way for you to mess around with it. And if you remember, what are the shape files created with? They're vector-based shape files, right? So this means that you can create them as big or as small as you'd like. And the quality is lossless because vector-based images don't lose quality based on size. In opposite version of your pixels, right? So if I zoom into pixels, you'll see it get a bit blurry. But with my vector-based, they stay pretty okay. Awesome. So that's your custom shape here. And all I would like to do for your participation here is the main thing I want to get a point is that after you create a path, you're able to use the pen tool on subtraction mode to cut out from that path to make maybe a more unique shape. In your project, you create a white glass that's empty in the center because you're going to put your logo. As you can see here, remember the logo only contains the wine red and white in the bottle. The glass is missing, so you're going to add in that glass. And if you see here, he cut out the center of the glass, whereas if we didn't use the subtraction tool, that would just be a solid white color there. Here. Where was I? Awesome. So again, mine looks a bit worse, but it's the same kind of concept where I had a solid white color and I was able to cut out from it so that I'm able to maybe mess around or add in my own logo there. So for your participation, what I would like to see is either using this image or any image that you'd like to use with. Make a path around one of them and then cut around a path and see if you can mimic what I've done here. And then if you don't mind doing so, you can go to the edit button and then define a new shape. And then after you define the new shape, you can try to check around in the custom shapes for it. This portion here with defining the shape isn't necessary. We don't do it all the time. But if you would like to try it out, you're more than welcome. But for this participation today, I would just like to see you guys working with the path and then subtracting from it. So that's actually it for my lecture here.